Why do you think so many scientists still stick to materialism or evolution?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think many of them are just gutless. I mean, I think they just go along with the flow.
Welcome back to the Science Dilemma. My name is Alan, and today's guest is none other than Dr. William Dembski. He holds a PhD in mathematics as well as a PhD in philosophy and a master's in theology. So he's a mathematician, philosopher, and theologian. He is one of the most influential voices within intelligent design. And in this episode, he reveals why one of the most common attacks on intelligent design, which is called the God of the Gaps objection, completely misses the mark. Wait till the end because you're gonna wanna hear what he has to say about doubts. With that being said, let's dive in. Dr. Dembski, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
What made you first interested in the question, where did we come from?
Right. Well, I think it's a question everybody asks, right?
Yeah.
And there are not too many options. If you're a believer in a God who's created the world, then ultimately our source derives from God. But if there is no God, if all that there is matter, energy, the motions and modifications of matter, then you have to come through some sort of evolutionary process. And, that's a big question. Which is it? I mean, there's some other options out there as well, but those seem to be the main ones that we deal with in our culture.
I know that you've probably seen this before where Richard Dawkins likes to say, well, because you were raised a certain way, therefore you believe this. What do you say to that type of an objection?
Well, I think there is a sense of inertia that we tend to go with what we've been taught, and yet Dawkins himself was raised in a Christian background and he left it. So he's a counterexample to that himself.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so with the degrees that you have, I mean, you have a math degree, philosophy, and theology. And I believe theology and philosophy are your PhDs. Is that correct?
No, actually, it's the math and philosophy that are
Oh, it's
the
math. Okay.
PhDs, and then the
Philosophy, and you had psychology as well for a bachelor's.
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So I was all over the map.
Yeah, you have a lot of degrees. What would you say you use the most when thinking about science and God?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say because I think they at times I'll have the hat of a mathematician, so I just completed a very long paper on something called conservation of information, but I'll write on philosophical topics. So it depends what I'm working on, but they all seem to hang together and they all motivate each other.
With one of your disciplines being math, how does that actually help us figure out if something was designed or if everything was designed? How does math point to designer?
Right. I mean, it's one thing, I think all of us have intuitions about design. Was she pushed? Did she fall? One is intentional, one is accidental. Is that mountain the result of wind and erosion? Is that mountain the result of an artist chipping away at it? If you go to the south, what is it, southeast South Dakota or southwest South Dakota, and there's Mount Rushmore, but there are other mountains there. Some of them don't give any clear evidence of design. Others do. So we have these intuitions about what's designed, but if you're going to build a science of design, you're going to need to have something more than just, well, it sure looks designed to me. And so what I discovered in my research is that there are some clear mathematical guidelines or methods that we use in practice to determine whether something is designed. And so I can give you just an example. And this one is neutral in the sense that people who are theists, people who are materialists can both get on board with that. And that's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So what is SETI, or the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, trying to do? It's looking at radio signals from outer space and trying to determine whether the signal gives evidence of intelligence or it doesn't. Okay. Now, it could be, you can imagine, for instance, a signal coming in. Let's imagine it's coming in as a set of bits, so zeros and ones. Any communication can be reduced to zeros and ones. And so you get this you get a sequence of 8 bits, and in Unicode, it's the letter A, you know. If you get that sequence of bits, are you going to be able to say, oh, that's an alien? They started a sentence and they started it with the indefinite article A, you know. And maybe there was an alien at the other end, clacking out a signal, you know, a wonderful day has arrived in the history of our civilizations. We have now finally established contact with the people of Earth and so on, you know. But the thing is, before that alien could get to the next letter after that initial letter A, he had a heart attack and died. Okay. So that letter A was fully intentional. It was designed, you know, maybe, I don't know what it was, 010111100 or something, you know. But you would never know that it's designed, because if you're monitoring millions, billions of radio channels, you're going to see any sequence of bits of 8 in length. So it's not just, you know, it's not just, you're going to need more bits if you're going to be able to determine that you're dealing with something that's designed. And so that more bits, what you need is complexity. You need a long sequence. You know, it's not just to be or not to be, you know, the word to. If you see that, you know, T-O, well, that could happen just by 2 letters coming together. But to be or not to be, that is the question, whether it is noble or et cetera. You know, if you have that whole passage, then the complexity of that says, wait a second, that couldn't happen by chance. But it's not just the complexity, because highly improbable things happen all the time. If you get out a coin and start tossing it, toss it 1,000 times, you're going to have a very highly improbable event. But most likely there's no pattern, nothing recognizable in that sequence that would convince you that you're dealing with an intelligence. So you're going to need more than just the improbability. You're also going to need a pattern. It's got to be a recognizable pattern, something we call a specification. And so it's specified complexity. It's complex. There's got to be a long sequence, or there's got to be enough there so that you could even suspect an intelligence. But the complexity by itself is not enough. You also need a recognizable pattern. And when you have those two things that converge, then you get a design inference. And so that's my big insight. You know, if you've got 5 siblings and your parents are celebrating their 50th anniversary, and, you know, each sibling gives them a present. First one gives them 6 cups, the next 6 saucers that match the cups, the next 6 plates that match them, the next, you know, a coffee pot and a teapot that matches that, and so on. And all the pieces, all the items are from the same set of china. You know, you're not going to say, oh, all the siblings bought their parents, you know, this china. It was just by chance that they did it, you know, even though, you know, you may not have thought, you know, the parents looking at this, they didn't know they were going to be getting any china, you know. So it's, so that's why, you know, this idea of specified complexity, it actually ends up extending some of the existing statistical theory.
I'm going to do this in 10 seconds. If you want more bonus resources for this and every episode and early access to all future Science Dilemma series, go to our website for more information. That's it. I got 1 second. Why do you think so many scientists still stick to materialism or evolution?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think many of them are just gutless. I mean, I think they just go along with the flow. You know, it's not fun to buck the trend. So I do wonder just how many are really convinced in their heart of hearts that Darwin, or, you know, some more recent rendition of Darwin, you know, gets it exactly right in explaining how we get all of living systems. You know, I wonder how many are truly convinced. I mean, and you'll see this even with some of the high-profile people. There was, for instance, a fellow named Francisco Ayala. He worked with Theodosius Dembski, one of the key people in the neo-Darwinian synthesis. And Ayala was writing on the Darwin's gift, that the Darwin's was the greatest contribution ever to science, and that and not just science but theology, that, you know, we really need to make our peace with Darwin, that Darwin got things exactly right. But then if there was a colleague of mine, Larry Witham, who interviewed him. And in a more private interview, he said, yeah, we really need a fundamental breakthrough in evolution because what we've got now doesn't really handle it.
No
So I think
way.
but I think a lot of it is also, I said gutlessness, I think just kind of going with the flow. But I think there's a sense in which it's just easier. It's a way of keeping control. So people, we don't want these crazy creationists. Intelligent design, as far as they're concerned, is just creationism in a cheap tuxedo. I mean,
We
I've
see
heard
that in
that.
our comments all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, so so they dismiss it that way, and it helps to have this kind of uniform line. We're all in accord. There's no problem with the House of Darwin. Everything is fine. Nothing to see here. And these people are crazy.
Could you help us with this objection that I'm sure people get when they go to these academic spaces, which is that intelligent design is just God of the gaps argument? Like, if somebody is at a university, probably the ones that you're mentioning that would stop somebody from getting tenure for this very topic, how should they respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's not a God of the gaps or argument from ignorance, and it's an argument from knowledge. I mean, what's an argument from ignorance? I mean, it's something like, you know, that picture on the wall fell. We don't know how it happened, so a ghost did it. It's like you don't know what was the cause, so you invoke something. And you have no sense of what it is, or you know, we have no idea how this bacterial flagellum came about. We don't. In terms of, I mean, some of the biologists, they'll say, well, there's this type 3 secretory structure that's embedded in it, but you don't really have an
Like, how was it
explanation
built?
of it. Okay,
Yeah.
and so then, what we're supposed to be saying is, well, we don't know how it came about by material means, so God must have done it. But that's not what we're saying. So the argument is, it's not on the basis of what we don't know, it's on the basis of what we do know. We look at the flagellum, we see high speed, bidirectional motor-driven propeller that's also wired into a signal transduction circuitry that helps this bacterium navigate through its watery environment and go up a food gradient. We have created signal transduction circuitries. We have created bidirectional motor-driven propellers. We see all sorts of design features there. We have no evidence of systems like this arising by blind material processes. We do have evidence of them arising by human engineering. So it's not that we are ignorant. I mean, it's not a God of the gaps. Gee, I have no idea how this came about, so God must have done it. It's because of what we know about the systems in question, the types, the features of it, the types of causal powers, the intelligence that's required to create those features in our experience, that we say, oh, this is the result of intelligence. And then if you want to go further, you can apply these mathematical design inferential methods to say, okay, well, what are the actual probabilities based on the material forces that are there? That's a very difficult question, actually, in the case of the bacterial flagellum, because these systems are so complex, but there are simpler systems, such as certain protein folds. This is work that Douglas Axe has done, where we can actually get some pretty good probability estimates. So that's what I would say. This is not an argument from ignorance. This is an argument from knowledge.
On that same topic, what would you say that people often get wrong about intelligent design when they hear about it?
Yeah, I think that's one of them. I think another is to conflate it with creationism. And so they are related, but they are not the same thing, because creationism and the doctrine of creation is about the source of being. Where did things come from in the first place? There's a joke that I use to illustrate this. scientists come to God and say, we can do everything you can do. And God says, well, that's interesting. What do you have in mind? And scientists say, well, we can create humans from scratch. And God says, show me. And the scientists say, well, we'll just take some dust and they're about ready to do something. And God says, well, wait a second, get your own dust. Okay, so the idea is you've got to have something to work with. And creation is about where you get that stuff to work with in the first place. What's the source of being? Where did things come from in the first place? So design is always concerned with the structure, function of but where you take existing materials and work them together. And the thing is, when you're dealing with something that's designed, these are finite material objects. And so what from an intelligent design vantage then is if you're dealing with finite material object that's giving evidence of purpose, design, intelligence, there's intelligence involved, but you don't know necessarily the extent of that intelligence. The intelligence has to be sufficient to explain what you're dealing with. So if you've got something that's very high tech, a Stone Age technology is not going to explain it. So it's got to be sufficient. But if you can imagine, for instance, a balanced scale, and that this side is down and it's covered, so it's pushed this side up. So it's explaining what's on this side, and this is something that's designed. How heavy is what's on this side? Well, you don't know. And it's at least as heavy as that. It's got to be able to explain that, but it could be a lot heavier. It could be infinitely heavy for all you know. Maybe if it was infinitely heavy, it would just crash through and just, but the point is, creation is always a doctrine of where things ultimately came from. Intelligent design, it becomes then a scientific enterprise because you're looking for you're trying to explain in terms of intelligence as such, and then as an intelligence that's adequate to explain the effect that you're trying to account for. A doctrine of creation gives you the source of everything. It's always going to be a theological doctrine. And so that I think is an important point. And it's a point that critics don't want to make. They want to say, oh, intelligence is just creationism. It's theology. And so then you're just trying to work religion into science. And I think this is the key point really with intelligent design. It is that we are turning this from a religion versus science controversy to a science versus science controversy. And it's a point I often make, because if it's a religion versus science controversy, that's going to be a loser in our culture. But if it is science versus science, then you have a potential winner.
What would you say to the student that is just in science class and it's kind of shaking their faith because they're at one of those universities and they're not sure how to kind of grapple with that? The topic.
I mean, I think the answer is always in these circumstances going deeper, not just kind of wallowing in your doubts, but start reading the other side. There's always another side. I mean, we've got our literature. I mean, there's a big literature on intelligent design these days. I mean, there's Behe's Darwin's Black Box and follow-ups there. Steve Meyer's written 3 books that are very powerful. There's my work on intelligent design. There's a question and answer book that I did some years back called The Design Revolution. So I think there's, Privileged Planet. There are videos if you don't have time to read. Illustra Media has done some really fine videos, but you're gonna have to inform yourself. I remember getting this very bright undergraduate who contacted me. It was clear that his faith was being shaken, and the recommendation I had is it's not by withdrawing, but you've got to jump in with both feet and learn more and learn the other side. I mean, I went to a liberal seminary. It was Princeton Theological Seminary. It wasn't totally liberal. I mean, there were still people that were theologically sound there, but you had to learn not just the criticism, the form criticism or whatnot, but also the other side. So it's so you basically had more reading to do. Philip Johnson used to say that the answer to evolution is more evolution. You got to know more about it. It's so it's I think it's immersing yourself. If you're feeling your faith shaken, realize that answers are out there, but you're going to have to find them. Seek and you'll find, but you've got to look. If you're just going to kind of lay back and bare your throats, I mean, they will cut it for you. So it's you don't want that to happen.
Well, thank you. This has been awesome, just learning from you and hearing from you. And thank you for your time as well.
Hey, my pleasure, Alan. All the best to you.
Have a good one.